so let's do our Elysium Milestone analysis. Now I already did the Tharsis one. If you want to know a little more about the series, you can go to that one, but I'll briefly explain the what I'm doing here, and it's basically analyzing the 5 milestones in this case the Elysium map in terms of 7 characteristics that I invented. And you know, this is mostly based on observation. I haven't compiled any statistics or anything on games of terraforming Mars. It's just based on what I observe from playing a lot of games in the Steam version. So we're gonna base this on what's available in the Steam version, which is base game plus Prelude. I might mention the other expansions, but I mean obviously on the map I'm talking about. But yeah, Colonies, Turmoil, and Venus, including the Venus Award, the Venus Award and Milestone. I will not talk about those because I just haven't. I since I'm basing this on observation, I would need too many games. So, well, you have the 5 milestones here and the categories. So, generation, I will be talking about the average generation that I see the award get, the milestone get grabbed, and the earliest. So it's pretty straightforward. Volatility is how easy it is to flip this milestone on someone. So you think you're in the lead, and then someone takes 4 turns, 2 at the end of one generation, then 2 at the beginning of the other generation. How easy it is to steal something, go from not being in competition for it at all to take it. Deviation means how much you have to deviate from a good playing style to go for this milestone. So obviously the highest the worst, same with volatility. And blockability is how much other players can do to keep you from getting these milestones when you're close. So again, the higher the blockability, the worse. And then we're gonna go over what corporations have let's say a lead on that milestone, what caps it, I'll explain that when it goes, and what strategies in general terms it aligns with. So let's begin. For generation. So yeah, generalist. So yeah, generalist is a really bad milestone. I rarely ever want to do this. For any other reason than getting the milestone, or maybe you get some freaky combination of production cards. Like maybe you're going for metals and you happen to grab one of the hit bonuses on the hit track, and maybe play an energy that you're gonna use anyway, and then for some reason have a plant. Or maybe you're Robinson Industries. So Robinson Industries can take it in the 3rd generation easy, almost consistently. Maybe the 2nd if they get a little lucky. So it can go 2nd actually. But for the most certainly players take this in the 5th or 6th generation. It might be a scenario like the one I mentioned. Don't see it very often. Specialist. Now, Specialist is a really fast milestone, especially with Prelude. There's those 2 Preludes, Business Empire and Allied Bank. And yeah, that gives you 10. So you can just, take Specialist without playing any projects. But other than that, money production is not that expensive. And again, with Preludes, not just the ones that give you the money production directly, but something like donation can allow you to play more money cards. So yeah, the earliest is the 1st generation, because I do see that happen. 2 or 3 can be average, and it's usually going to be money, energy, or heat. Like money, like 70% of the time. Energy and heat on some. I'll go into that, but yeah. Ecologist. So ecologist, yeah. So it can go early sometimes. And honestly, when you see Ecological Zone, that has 2 tags. It's the only card in the base game plus Prelude that has 2 tags besides Advanced Ecosystems. But if you have Advanced Ecosystems, you already have 3 tags, so I'm not counting it. But yeah, with maybe a Prelude or a Corporation early Ecological Zone, it can go 2nd generation, usually 3 or 4. You usually see players play plant production cards. or something like Arctic algae, stuff like that. Good things for early plant development, or psychrophiles even. So there are a few cheap cards that do help. It's not all bad, lichen crap. And yeah, it's a little more. It's a little later because not because there aren't that many tags, but because you need to play the good tags, and then maybe for the fourth one you can throw in a bad tag. But yeah. 3 or 4 is the average. And then, yeah, Tycoon. So Tycoon is really easy to predict. But yeah, usually, like, the earliest is usually 4. Except with, like, some crazy corporations. But, yeah, you basically need 15 green or blue cards, which are most of the cards. Like, asteroids are, I think, less than a fifth of the deck. Not asteroids, events, but still you need to see a lot of cards to get to 15. And finally, Legend. So Legend, when it's claimed, is early, and that's because there are a few cheap events. But yeah, sometimes they just don't show up. So, but yeah, when players find, like science constant, invention contest or stuff like that, yeah, you can see early. But yeah, so that's generation. And one thing I will mention about the Elysium milestones is that the two sort of complement each other. So I mean, Tycoon and Legend directly contradict each other, and Specialist and Generalist not directly, but kind of. And then Ecologist just to help the plant people. But yeah, let's keep going into Volatility. So like I said, Volatility is how easy it is to like flip this milestone on someone. So high volatility, bad, and generalist is very low. So as I said in my Tharsis video, milestones are generally made up of a number and a thing. So like if you think the number, in this case it's really 6 each of the productions, 10 for specialist, 4, 5, 15, 5, and then the thing, which is what you have to get. And so it's usually you can see, like, often there's tags, there's cards like Tycoon and Legend, or there's production, or terraforming rating, stuff like that. But the lower the number, the more volatilities. However, it also matters how much of that number can you get with a single action. And so for generalist, there's I think a couple of cards that give you 2 productions. Like Industrial Microbes gives you energy and steel, or there's the one that gives you money and titanium. There's a couple like that, including IO, Mining Industries. And there's like Aerobrake Ammonia Asteroid, and a few Jovians that give you plants and heat. I don't think there's any that give you 3 other than the Metals Company Prelude. But also, yeah, it's not that volatile because we'll see this one has really high deviation. So generally, if a player is sitting at 2 or 3 productions, they're out of this award. Don't worry about it. I didn't say very low just because of 6 is not that high, and you can get 2. So I don't know. You can be like playing a mineral game. You have some energy, and for some reason you decide to play Aerobrake Ammonia Asteroid, and you get there. Still the milestone, but probably even in that case, Aerobrake Ammonia Asteroid isn't worth it. Specialists very high. So, well, the number is high, 10 is high, but you can get a lot of production with some cards. So for money, the biggest one is Immigration Shuttles, not counting the ones that are variable, like Cartel. And Cartel can get you 6, 5 easy. And then for energy, you have Mass Converter. For heat, you have Solera. So yeah, this award is never safe. I mean, you can pretty much not like think if someone's not gonna go for heat like after the 4th generation, but since this one goes early anyway, this is an award that if you're sitting on 10, you take immediately. Like anyone can easily take this award away in 2 actions. So milestone. So yeah, this is one of the most volatile things. And that's the main thing about volatility is like you usually want to delay when you're sitting on it as much as possible, because well the 8 you spend, you'd rather delay that to use it on economy until you absolutely have to take it. With lower volatility, you can wait more. With higher volatility, you just get it. And Specialist is the best example of that, I think. Ecologist, like I say, this is high, and the main reason is ecological zone. Now, first of all, early ecological zone is a good play. If you already have that greenery, put the tile, pick up some plants, maybe place a greenery, protect your greeneries, and you start making a bunch of points. So yeah, it's a good play, and it gives you 2 out of 4. So if anyone's sitting at 2, you know 2 actions is all they need to take it. If it's at 1, they can still use the end of the turn and the next turn to steal it, but it's a little safer. But still, 2 isn't hard to sit on, so I would usually grab this unless everyone is at 0. If I'm sitting at 4, it's pretty high. Tycoon is very low, and well, save for some crazy place where people just have a bunch of cheap blue and green cards in their hand that they haven't played for some reason, you can really see early who's gonna take Tycoon. It's usually going up slowly for each, and you're capped by, we'll see that in the cap, but you're capped by generation. So yeah, Tycoon. And the other thing is you can only play 1 per action. It's a high number, 15, and you can only play 1. So unless you leave it all to the end of the turn for the other player to play a bunch of cheap cards, you're safe. So one of the lowest in my opinion, Tycoon. And Legend, medium. There aren't that many Legend cards, but there are some good cheap early ones. And 5 is a small number. It's still 1 per turn, so that's why it's medium. You cannot play more than 1 event per action. So yeah, you can still see it coming if you have enough time. If you don't have enough stall to not let the player take a bunch of straight actions, which is rarely the case early in the game. So yeah, both Tycoon and Legend is a little higher because it's 5, and someone could be sitting at 2 and use the 4 straight actions to take it. With Tycoon it's almost impossible. So let's talk about Deviation. And yeah, Generalist might be the most horrible award to take. Now, there are a few fine ways to do that, and so, like I said, getting the heat off the track. If you're going for an engine game, so you probably have both minerals and money production, you get the heat off the track. You find some way to get plant production. That's probably the one you have to go most out of the way for. And then energy, there's a lot of power hungry cards. You just have to hold the energy for a turn, and then use your power hungry card. But I generally never need the 6 productions. I usually get at least one of them to take the award. Often it's gonna be 2, unless you're Robinson Industries, which is just meant for this award. So this is all this corporation does. It's just it's actually a decent corporation, but it will take generalist every time. Never go for generalist. This is in game. Honestly, it's one of the more corporations that's more destined for a milestone. And I apologize, I keep flipping the words award and milestones. I'm talking about milestones. Specialist, very low. You generally want the same production of something, right? You're going for plants, 10 plant production, bring it. That's not going to be the case often with plants, but early in the game you also you don't want to go from 6 heat production to 10 production mid game. You're not gonna pay for 4 production mid game. But early in the game, if you can get to 10, sure. I mean, you rush the heat, just find a way to rush the oxygen track as fast as possible, and there's no thermalist here, but maybe you can get terraforming, insulation or something like that, hopefully. And then there's money. There's no bad reason to get to 10 money unless you're plant rushing, ocean walking all over the place. In which case you just don't wanna, but it's still if you have a cheap way to get to 10, you would. So yeah, Specialist, one of the best milestones to go for this reason. Ecologist, so medium. So here's the thing: if you're going for plants, so there aren't that many plant, animal, and microbe early cards. There's a few. So there's Arctic Algae, Psychophiles, Ecological Zone, but there's that requirement of having the greenery, which you might have. And then there's like corporations and preludes, which actually, because the number is 4, they give you, a 25% of the milestone. But I do find that sometimes you might have to play a plant card, plant production card that's a little earlier, or keep something like lichen to finish taking it. There's also pets. Pets is the other good animal card, early animal card. The micro bumpers, I'm not a huge fan of. Decomposers is good. So, like, there could be a few, but you might. Yeah, Bio Enhancer is also good, by the way. But you might have to, like, play maybe, lichen or something like that a little earlier that you would want to, or maybe greenhouses or something like that, which you'd rather save for the end of the game and get a bunch of plants. So there's a medium deviation. I could see this as low, because the plant player generally plays a lot of plant text, but yeah. Tycoon, low. So, I mean, the thing is, again, you can't do much to increase your pace in this award, but it's still like very low deviation. I mean, you might have to buy an extra green or blue card you don't want and play it. It's not the end of the world. Not much else to say here, yeah. And then Legend is high, and so the reason is that because there's a lot less event cards, you might have to play a very expensive event way before you want to. So I do find that with Legend, that 4th and 5th event don't come as easy, and generally at the beginning of the game, the green and blue cards are better because they have more lasting effects. Whereas like the good events, like the big events, the asteroids, you probably should save that maybe to control the heat track if you can, unless you have a lot of money and nothing else to play, which it's the best way to develop and kill plants from your opponent. But you generally, it's not a great first turn play. Like, I don't love it. I'd rather do green and blue development cards. And the event card draw, which is quite a bit, you might want to save that for a little later when you know better what you're doing. So, yeah, I do find, despite how similar these two awards are, the events tend to, like, I often have to step outside my strategy a lot more. Okay, so let's move on to blockability. Generally, it's very high. You know exactly what your opponent will need to complete it, and you can just block it in the draft, and there won't be that many options. And if it's at 4, you can block both, or just pass him really bad cards that actually get the production and let him shoot himself in the foot, which you probably won't. So yeah, you can block the good production cards of each of these and make him either deviate a lot or not take it. So very blockable. It's very easy to see what they need. Yeah. Specialist, medium blockability. I mean, you will also see what they need, but there's just gonna be usually more options, especially if it's money. If it's heat and energy, it's actually very blockable. So yeah, there's not that many heat and energy production cards, and if it's plants, it's like just take insects and they won't get to 10. The other actually that gets there is Mining Guild, but usually you should cut Mining Guild at 6 production and then focus on something else. So when you get to 10, it's either really late or you're kind of playing Mining Guild wrong. But yeah, I would say medium just because there's just too many money production cards. And yeah, it's too easy to get to. It's a lot easier to get to than you think. Ecologist, I would say this is a little easier to block because, well, there aren't that many, early good plant and animal attacks. So you can basically do the same as generalist, just block the good ones and make them play Lichen, or not take the award. Tycoon is nearly impossible to block. there's really like, I mean, if there's like draft with like 4 events and one green or blue card, then you take it. Otherwise, you're gonna pass him a green or blue card, and they're gonna play it for the milestone. So yeah, almost impossible to block. And legend, I'd say medium because there are a lot of, like in a draft, you probably on average see 3 green and blue, 1 red. So you can easily block that red. The thing is that they also will see a red. So on average. So medium, right? If it was like 1 out of 8, then it would be much higher. But yeah, with legend, yeah, you see usually 1 every 4, 1 every 5. So each player will see 1 in their 4 cards, and you can block the one on your side, but not the one on their side. So medium. Okay, so let's talk about the corporations that can go for it. So generalist. Okay, so it's Robinsons. Like it's the difference between 1 and 2 here is stupid. So this is Robinsons. Just if you see them, leave them alone. Now, Utopia Invest, I put them here because they do start with 2 productions, and they have, I think, with like their ability actually can like, you can produce something and pop it off for 4 of that resource if you aren't gonna use it a lot. So they aren't hurt as much from like a completely diversified economy because they can get the effect early and just forget about that resource. But and here I also put Aphrodite because, well, the best strategy with Aphrodite is to kill yourself. Like if you are for some reason playing with Aphrodite, remember you see 2 corps, not 1. So you just, like if you pick Aphrodite over the other one of the other 39 corps, it's your fault. But Aphrodite has an incoherent plant production. So, if you don't kill yourself, I might as well go for generalist. Because you can do like a Venus strat with like money and titanium, and you have an incoherent, plant. So why not get an incoherent steel and energy and heat? Why the fuck not? And then Recyclone, I mean, this is barely an advantage. Recyclone starts with 1 steel production, and you can get plant production kind of passively by playing steel techs. So, like, you can go for the metal strategy and just get that 1 production, get the heat of the track, get the energy of a building card. So, it's really weird, but this one actually has a way to get there that's not horrible. Which is getting the plant and the energy sort of passively, and then going for a mineral, boom game strategy, and you will need power at some point. So at that point, you take it, and you just pop off your microbes for plants every now and then. But yeah, really, the only one that should go for this is Robinson. Only if you're desperate. Anyone else? Okay, so specialist. Yeah. Aridor is number 1. Aridor gets 1 money production for every different tag that you play, which is usually going to be 3 or 4 on the first generation with preludes. There's going to be tags there, and the cards you play, 3 different ones, not crazy. It can be 5 or 6, but it's usually going to be 3 or 4. But then this ability keeps on going every generation, so you can get passive money production 1 at a time and play other good money production cards. So yeah, I know it's a little weird to have 1 ranked first that doesn't start with money production, but they're just so good at getting it. So yeah, Aridor number 1, and Polyphemus is second. Polyphemus starts with 5, which is a big head start on Aridor, but after the 5, like after the first generation, they'll have 5, Aridor will have 3 or 4, and then Aridor will just continue to get some Polyphemus want. Now, Polyphemus can get, immigration shuttles and claim it almost immediately, sure, but generally they depend a lot more on the cards that they get, and they cannot afford to be inefficient with their cards. Like a lot of the money production cards are cheap, which is not good for Polyphemus. Polyphemus wants to play big cards with big effects like immigration shuttles because the cards are more expensive. So I do think Aridor has the head start here on Polyphemus. But yeah, Polyphemus can take it with Business Empire, and so can Mons, number 3. So Mons, yeah, they start with 4, so everything except about Polyphemus, -1, and they can take it with Business Empires, and then Chongqing. Chongqing starts with 3 production, and they also have a discount on building tax, which sometimes have money production, so that makes it a little easier to get there. And then I would say lakefront, because the oceans, 4 early oceans is not crazy, so they can get 4 passively. And then Arclight just because they start with 2 production is a tiny head start. I would say lesser than lakefront because the passive oceans will get you there maybe faster, but and on someone else's dimes, like some other players playing them. But yeah, those top 6 are all money ones, and then Thorgate actually has some crazy energy plays because people. Sometimes people don't block energy from Thorgate for some reason, and there's a standard project. So a standard project energy is more significant than you think. You can play 16. I wouldn't pay more than that if it's an emergency, but you can pay 16 if it's an emergency to get the last 2. But other than that, if you manage to get some science, it's also good. But like playing, like the energy cards just become so efficient for them. The cheaper the better, but even like Giant Space Mirror costing 17, including the buy cost, that's less than 6 per energy, which is rare. So yeah, and then Helion, they start with 3 heat, so it's a head start. Like they can Solera their way to that award, and then the Mining Guild, I mentioned it. But yeah, the Mining Guild, you shouldn't get early to 10 steel production. It can happen late because you'll eventually start. You should get to 5 or 6 in the 3rd generation. That's usually my goal with Mining Guild, 5 or 6, and you'll be floating a lot of steel by the end of the game. But yeah, 5 or 6 will get you a great economy. After that, just try to move your resources towards money or plants. That's what you want to do with Mining Guild. Now you will get to 10 many times because you'll just eventually place greeneries and cities over tiles with steel and get the production, because why the fuck not. But you shouldn't get there early, so I put Mining Guild in there, but you really shouldn't play it like that. Alright, so for Ecologist, yeah, we have all these corporations. And yeah, Splice is probably the first one. Now you'll notice the first 7 here start with a valid tax, and they're all of the ones that start with that tag. That's why they're here. So Splice, Arclight, Viron, Ecoline, Aphrodite, Recycler, and Septon Tribus. They all start with the tag towards the 4. Septon Tribus, it counts. But Splice draws 2 microbe cards, and on top of that, playing microbe cards gives them money, which means they can be a little bit more efficient about it when you play some of those bad early microbe cards, and so it's more aligned with their strategy. They actually want to play the tags, so I'd say they're number 1, and mostly because they draw that microbe card. It should be more for Splice, considering all the bad microbe cards that exist. They should draw more cards, but whatever. And then Arclight and Viron, now they both start with a tag. And the reason I decided to put Arclight ahead is because they have 1 more mega credit by the 3rd generation, because they start, it's 45 and 2 production against 48. And really, money does play a role in Ecologists, because you might have to play an inefficient card with these tags. So yeah, I give Arclight a slight edge because they do outpace Byron by the 3rd generation in income. Well, not in income, in money. And then Ecoline, Ecoline, obviously they start with very little money, but they start with the plant production, and so their bad plant production cards are a little better for them, because going from 2 to 3 is a lot better than going from 0 to 1. So that's why I put them 3rd. And then Aphrodite, again, kill yourself if you choose this, but if you don't, go for a milestone. Who gives a fuck? Recycling is weird because Recycling actually wants to play building tags. So out of all the ones with the tag, it's one of the least aligned ones. And then Septon Tribus wants to play with the Senate early, They do have attack, but they want to play with their Senate. And then the reason Ardor is there is because they might actually want to play like an animal tag and get like it's not an advantage in terms of drawing the card, but you it can be within your strategy to play a tag, an animal tag, an early tag, or a microbe tag that you wouldn't play because you want the production. So, not great, but I mean it's very insignificant, but it's a better than others. Okay, let's talk about Tycoon. Tycoon, yeah, the top candidate for me is MSI. The reason I put MSI in there is because it draws 3 Venus tags and it starts with 50 capital. So generally for Tycoon, the capital is very important, and the cards, so both. But drawing 3 cards that are Venus tags, there's only one Venus event. So this is basically drawing 3 green or blue cards. And it's 10 poorer than Terractor. So yeah, that's ahead of Terractor. Terractor have 60 money. So, yeah, it's probably the second best to do it. Chongqing, they don't start with as much money, but they want to play building tags, which are never events. So, yeah, it's very aligned with their strategy to draw building tags, so they don't have any advantage towards actually, playing it. And then Priester and Credit Core, I would say Priester is ahead because they generally want to play more early development cards, whereas Credit Core's bonus really goes against Tycoon because the bigger the cards you play, the less cards you can play. The difference is 4 mega credits in how they start, but yeah, I would say Priester slight edge, more aligned towards strategy, and then Lakefront and Mons, they start with a lot of money. And Vitor can, because they want to play victory point cards and they can get a bonus from it. Some early cards actually can be really efficient for them, like Natural Preserve. But yeah, really, because this is capped firstly by gens, we're gonna see that next, and secondly by money, but it's mostly gens. Now, no corporation has any control over that, so except MSI a little bit, but yeah. And then Legend. Okay, so Inventrix, drawing 3 extra cards, I think that's the more important thing. The main thing you want to see is a lot of cards, so you can see a lot of events which are less common. So Inventrix, 3 extra cards. And then Point Luna, they'll draw cards. They can go over the 3 Inventrix gets kind of quickly, but not necessarily, so I ranked them second. And then ICN, Interplanet Cinematics, it just aligns with their strategy. And then Credit Card and Lakefront, it also aligns with their strategy. And the fact that you can play space events as expensive cards, it matters less because you only need 5, not 15. So you don't need to go for 5 cheap legend as 5 cheap events. You can get 3-4 cheap ones and then a couple expensive ones. So yeah, I would say Credit Card and Lakefront have some advantage because the space events kind of align with them, the expensive events. Now the caps. Let's talk about the caps. So generally, it's gonna be capped by cards firstly, so you need to see cards that have the production, and then by money because you need to pay for this production. That's pretty obvious. Specialists really only by cards. I generally you want to play the production cards early anyway, so yeah, you don't money's usually not an issue for claiming specialists. It's just, do I get enough cards? Because if you get them, you'll go for money production and just take it. And money production is cheap. You can definitely get to 10 within 2 or 3 generations with what you start with. So yeah, it's all about the cards. Ecologies is both again. The first one's gonna be the cards. You need, the main thing is just finding those good tags, but it's also gonna be money because you might have to pay for an inefficient card to claim it. Now, Tycoon is capped, I would say, first by money and then by generation. And I had that the other way around before. Now, I did have a comment, or someone asked, what's the difference between generations and cards? And so when I say cards, is when it's like a very specific card. So you need to see a lot of cards to get the card you need to get the milestones. Whereas by gens, it's like most cards will do. You just need to get to the draft and pick them. So planner, it's not capped by the cards. You just need the generation because you'll see 4 cards. Whereas ecologist, I would say it's capped by cards because you need to find a card with a tag. So that's basically what I mean by cards and gens. I hope that's clearer now. But yeah, you need money to pay the 15, and then you need the generations. Now, I think events, I can actually check that. So there's almost 40 events out of 200 cards, so it is less than a fifth. So that means that for every 8 cards that you'll see 1 or 2 events, which means you see 6 or 7 green or blue cards. So you see the first 10, you probably see 8 there, and then in the next 12, so by 3rd generation, you've probably seen 15 cards. Now, you're not going to be seeing 15 good cards for sure. So, yeah, this is why this is a late award, usually a 4th generation award. You probably need to see 22 to 26 cards to get 15 good blue or green cards. There's also card draw, obviously, so that's usually card draw helps. But, yeah, this one is like harder to get because of that. And then legend is only capped by cards because I find that playing 5 events, it's not that really expensive unless you go for really expensive ones, which again is not the ideal thing early. But yeah, it's really like if you find one of those cheap events that draw cards, or look at cards and then draw cards, that's the main thing that helps you with legend, I find. Or the ones like indentured workers, that kind of thing. I feel that's the main, like the best thing to do to get legend. Okay, so finally, alignment. Generalist, it's only aligned with Robinson Industries. Don't go for it. Specialist, obviously, an engine game with MC production. It's all very clear. But also a heat energy rush can work if you manage to play all the heat production very early, or all the energy production very early. You can do that. It's not that easy to get to 10, but you can do that, and it's a good play by then. Ecologist, you want to ground rush game more often than not, because otherwise you want to play more cities early instead of more plant tags. And plant tags are going to be like 3 of the 4 tags usually. Maybe sometimes 2, like sacrifice can happen, or pets, or ecological zone, like I said, but usually you're gonna have at least 2 plant tags, probably 3, which means Arctic algae and a couple of early plant production cards, maybe some that are not efficient, or maybe an early greenhouses to like get some plants and place them next to the oceans and rush it. So yeah, ground rush is really the best for ecologists. Tycoon, you can do engine, mineral, MC, or science. Now, mineral and MC, obviously they let you play more cards, and they're usually cheap to play early, and science will draw you cards that will let you see more cards, and they're a little more expensive early, so maybe a hybrid of these, but science strategy will definitely be in play for Tycoon. And legend, also an engine game. I have science and mega credits only. And again, science would draw your cards. MC will let you play more. But really, legend is actually a little weird in that, if someone gets lucky and gets a few like generic events that because they're so cheap, they can kind of align with any strategy if you get lucky. So like, indentured workers, or anything that draws you cards after looking at a bunch of cards, cheap draw cards events, or the one that gives you 5 steel for no reason. Well, for playing, you pay 5 for 5 steel, or the sabotage and steel raiders. all of that stuff is really good early, and it kind of doesn't, like, it's not really against any strategy, so yeah, Legend can go with anything. Oh well, that's all I got for this video. It's like 40 minutes probably. I keep trying to go short, but I keep, just speaking too much. But yeah, like, subscribe, and see you next time. Bye.